Chapter 5 The Giver. Usually at the morning ritual, when the family members told their dreams, Jonas didn't contribute much. He rarely dreamed. Sometimes he awoke with a feeling of fragments afloat in his sleep, but he couldn't seem to grasp them and put them together into something worthy of telling at the ritual. But this morning was different. He had dreamed very vividly the night before. His mind wandered while Lily, as usual, recounted a lengthy dream, this one a frightening one in which she had, against the rules, been riding her mother's bicycle and had been caught by the security guards. They all listened carefully and discussed with Lily the warning that the dream had had. "Thank you for your dream, Lily," Jonas said the standard phrase automatically and tried to pay attention better while his mother told of a dream fragment, a disquieting scene where she had been chastised for a rule infraction she didn't understand. And together they agreed that it was probably resulted from her feelings that she had reluctantly dealt punishment to the citizen who had broken the major rule a second time. Father said that he had had no dreams. "Gabe?" Father asked, looking down at the basket where the new child lay gurgling after his feeding, ready to be taken back to the nurturing center for the day. They all laughed. Dream telling began with threes. If new children dreamed, no one knew. "Jonas?" Mother asked. They always asked, though they knew how rarely Jonas had a dream to tell. "I did dream last night," Jonas told them, and he shifted in his chair, frowning. "Good," Father said. "Tell us." "Well, the details aren't clear, really," Jonas explained, trying to recreate the odd dream in his mind. "I think I was in the bathing room at the old house of the old." "Well, that's where you were yesterday," Father pointed out. Jonas nodded. "But it really wasn't the same. There was a tub in the dream, but only one, and the real bathing room has rows and rows of them. But the room in the dream was warm and damp, and I'd taken off my tunic but hadn't put it on the smock, so my chest was bare. I was perspiring because it was so warm, and Fiona was there, the way she was yesterday." "Asher too?" Mother asked. Jonas shook his head. "No, it was only me and Fiona, alone in the room, standing beside the tub. She was laughing, but I wasn't. And I was almost a little angry at her in the dream, because she wasn't taking me seriously." "Seriously about what?" Lily asked. Jonas looked at his plate, and for some reason that he didn't understand, he felt slightly embarrassed. "I think I was trying to convince her that she should get into the tub of water." He paused. He knew he had to tell it all, that it was not only all right, but necessary to tell all of the dream. So he forced himself to relate the part that made him uneasy. "I wanted her to take off her clothes and get into the tub," he explained quickly. "I wanted to bathe her. I had the sponge in my hand, but she wouldn't, and she kept laughing and saying no." He looked at his parents. "That's all," he said. "Can you describe the strongest feeling in your dream, son?" Father asked. Jonas thought about it, and the details were murky and vague, but the feelings were clear and flooded him again now as he thought. "The wanting," he said. "I knew that she wouldn't, and I think I knew that she shouldn't. But I wanted it so terribly. I could feel the wanting all through me." "Thank you for your dream, Jonas," Mother said after a moment, and she glanced at Father. "Lily," Father said, "it's time to leave for school. Would you walk beside me this morning and keep an eye on the new child's basket? We want to be certain he doesn't wiggle himself loose." Jonas began to rise to collect his school books. He thought it surprising that they hadn't talked about his dream at length before the thank you. Perhaps they found it as confusing as he had. "Wait, Jonas," Mother said gently. "I'll write an apology for your instructor so that you won't have to speak one for being late." He sank back down into his chair, puzzled. He waved to Father and Lily as they left the dwelling, carrying Gabe in his basket. He watched while Mother tidied the remains of the morning meal and placed the tray by the front door for the collection crew. Finally, she sat down beside him at the table. "Jonas," she said with a smile, "the feeling you described is the wanting. It was your first stirrings. Father and I have been expecting it to happen to you. It happens to everyone. It happened to Father when he was your age, and it happened to me, and it will someday happen to Lily." "And very often," Mother added, "it begins with a dream." Stirrings, he had heard the word before. He remembered that there was a reference to the stirrings in the Book of Rules, though he didn't remember what it said. And now and then the speaker mentioned, "Attention, a reminder that stirrings must be reported in order for treatment to take place." He had always ignored that announcement because he didn't understand it, and it had never really applied to him in any way. He ignored, as most citizens did, many of the commands and reminders read by the speaker. "Do I have to report it?" he asked his mother. She laughed. "No, you did in the dream telling. That's enough." "But what about the treatment? The speaker says that treatment must take place." Jonas felt miserable. Just when the ceremony was about to happen, his ceremony of 12, would he have to go away someplace for treatment just because of some stupid dream? But his mother laughed again in a reassuring, affectionate way. "No, no," she said. "It's just the pills. You're ready for the pills, that's all. That's the treatment for stirrings." Jonas brightened. He knew about the pills. His parents both took them each morning, and some of his friends did. He knew. Once he had been heading off to school with Asher, both of them on their bikes, when Asher's father had called from their dwelling doorway, "You forgot your pill, Asher." Asher had groaned good naturedly, turned his bike, and riding back while Jonas waited. It was the sort of thing that one didn't ask a friend about, because it might have fallen into that uncomfortable category of being different. Asher took a pill each morning, Jonas did not. Always better, less rude, to talk about things that were the same. Now he swallowed the small pill that his mother handed him. "That's all?" he asked. "That's all," she said, returning the bottle to the cupboard. "But you mustn't forget. I'll remind you for the first few weeks, but then you must do it on your own. If you forget, the stirrings will come back. The dreams of stirrings will come back, and sometimes the dosage must be adjusted." "Asher takes them," Jonas confided. His mother nodded, unsurprised. "Many of your group mates probably do, the males at least, and they all will soon, females too." "How long will I have to take them?" "Until you enter the house of the old," she explained. "All of your adult life. But it becomes routine. After a while, you won't even pay much attention to it." She looked at her watch. If you leave right now, you won't even be late for school. Hurry along." "And thank you again, Jonas," she added as they went to the door, "for your dream." Pedaling rapidly down the path, Jonas felt oddly proud to have joined those who take the pills. And for a moment, though, he remembered the dream again. The dream had felt pleasurable. Though the feelings were confused, he thought that he had liked the feeling that his mother had called stirrings. He remembered that upon waking, he had wanted to feel the stirrings again. Then, in the same way that his own dwelling slipped away behind him as he rounded the corner on his bicycle, the dream slipped away from his thoughts. Very briefly, a little guiltily, he tried to grasp it back, but the feelings had disappeared. The stirrings were gone. And that's the end of chapter 5. Just have a look at the summary that will be on the slide just after this. Thank you. Okay, so that was the end of chapter 5. So now we'll just do a little summary about what happened during that chapter. So at the breakfast time, we learn about another ritual, the telling of dreams. We know that in this book there are a lot of different rituals. The community really follows different procedures that they have to do. So Jonas doesn't normally tell about his dreams because he doesn't technically have them normally, but this morning he did. So he's telling his dream about a moment he had with Fiona, and he's really confused about his feelings for her. So he starts talking about his feelings, the wanting, in other words. He's going through puberty right now, which is completely normal, but in this community, that's not really allowed because you can't have those feelings. Everybody has to be the same, everything is controlled. So he stays behind, he tells his dream, and his parents realize that, okay, he's going through puberty, so we have to do the next step, the next ritual. He stays behind and he talks to his mother about his feelings, and she just explains to him that these are completely normal, these are stirrings. She explains that she had them, his father had them, probably some of his classmates have done it too. And she explained that they have to be reported, which he's done in his dream. And then she tells him that he needs to start taking a pill every day so that he doesn't have these stirrings anymore because, as I said, the community is very controlled. So it has no feelings, sorry about the typo in the summary slide there, or emotions that might complicate this perfect balance that they have in the community. After Jonas takes the pill, he doesn't remember how he felt after the dream, but you can see in the end of the chapter that he's kind of grasping at it because he liked it. It was a good feeling, but it does go away. But then at the same time, he's also feeling a sense of pride now that he's among the people who do take the pill, like Asher and some of his other friends. And so he feels now that it's a new accomplishment in his life, the next step, so to say. So anyway, that was the end of chapter 5. So stay tuned for chapter 6. Chapter 6, The Giver. "Lily, please hold still," Mother said again. Lily, standing in front of her, fidgeted impatiently. "I can tie them myself," she complained. "I always have." "I know that," Mother replied, straightening the hair ribbons on the little girl's braids. "But I also know that they constantly come loose, and more often than not they're dangling down your back by afternoon. Today, at least, we want them to be neatly tied and to stay neatly tied." "I don't like hair ribbons. I'm glad I only have to wear them one more year," Lily said irritably. "Next year I get my bicycle, too," she added more cheerfully. "There are good things each year," Jonas reminded her. "This year, you get to start your volunteer hours. And remember last year, when you became a 7, you were so happy to get your front button jacket." The little girl nodded and looked down at herself at the jacket with his row of large buttons that designated her as a 7. 4s, 5s, and 6s all wore jackets that fastened down the back so that they would be able to help each other dress and would learn interdependence. The front button jacket was the first sign of independence, the first very visible symbol of growing up. bicycle at 9 would be the powerful emblem of moving gradually out into the community away from the protective family unit. Lily grinned and wriggled away from her mother. "And this year you get your assignment," she said to Jonas in an excited voice. "I hope you get pilot and that you can take me flying." "Oh, sure I will," said Jonas. "And I'll get a special little parachute that just fits you. And I'm going to take you up to, oh, say maybe 20,000 feet and open the door and—" "Jonas!" Mother warned. "I was only joking," Jonas groaned. "I don't want to be pilot anyway. If I get pilot, I'm going to put in for an appeal." "Come on," Mother said. She gave Lily's ribbons a final tug. "Jonas, are you ready? Did you take your pill?" "I want to get a good seat in the auditorium." She prodded Lily to the front door, and Jonas followed. It was a short ride to the auditorium, Lily waving to her friends from her seat on the back of Mother's bicycle. Jonas stowed his bicycle beside Mother's and made his way through the throngs of people to find his group. The entire community attended the ceremony each year. For the parents, it meant 2 days' holiday from work. They sat together in the huge hall. Children sat with their groups until they went, one by one, to the stage. Father, though, would not join Mother in the audience right away. For the earliest ceremony, the naming, the nurturers brought the new children to the stage. Jonas, from his place in the balcony with the 11s, searched the auditorium for a glimpse of Father. It wasn't hard at all to spot the nurturers section at the front. Coming from it were the wails and howls of the new children who sat squirming on the nurturers' laps. At every other public ceremony, the audience was silent and attentive, but once a year they all smiled indulgently at the commotion from the little ones waiting to receive their names and families. Jonas finally caught his father's eye and waved. Father grinned and waved back, then held up a hand to the new child on his lap, making him wave too. It wasn't Gabriel. Gabe was back at the nurturing center today, being cared for by the night crew. He had been given an unusual and special reprieve from the committee and granted an additional year of nurturing before his naming and placement. Father had gone before the committee with a plea on behalf of Gabriel, who had not yet gained the weight appropriate to his days of life, nor begun to sleep soundly enough at night to be placed with his family unit. Normally, such a new child would be labeled inadequate and released from the community. Instead, as a result of Father's plea, Gabriel had been labeled uncertain and given the additional year. He would continue to be nurtured at the center and would spend his nights with Jonas's family unit. Each family member, including Lily, had been required to sign a pledge that they would not become attached to this little temporary guest, and that they would relinquish him without protest or appeal when he was assigned to his family unit next year's ceremony. At least Jonas thought after Gabriel was placed next year, they would still see him often because he would be part of the community. If he were released, they would not see him again, ever. Those who were released, even as new children, were sent elsewhere and never returned to the community. Father had not had to release a single new child this year, so Gabriel would have represented a real failure and sadness. Even Jonas, though he didn't hover over the little one the way Lily and his father did, was glad that Gabe had not been released. The first ceremony began right on time, and Jonas watched as one after another each new child was given a name and handed by the nurturers to its new family unit. For some, it was the first child, but many came to the stage accompanied by another child beaming with pride to receive a little brother or sister, the way Jonas had when he was about 5. Asher poked Jonas's arms. "Remember when we got Philippa?" he asked in a loud whisper. Jonas nodded. It had only been last year. Asher's parents had waited quite a long time before applying for a second child. Maybe, Jonas suspected, they had been so exhausted by Asher's lively foolishness that they had needed a little time. 2 of their group, Fiona and another female named Thea, were missing temporarily, waiting with their parents to receive new children. But it was rare that there was such an age gap between children in a family unit. When her family ceremony was completed, Fiona took the seat that had been saved for her in a row ahead of Asher and Jonas. She turned and whispered to them, "He's cute, but I don't like his name very much." She made a face and giggled. Fiona's new brother had been named Bruno. It wasn't a great name, Jonas thought, like, well, Gabriel, for example, but it was okay. The audience applause, which was enthusiastic at each name, and rose in an exuberant swell when one parental pair, glowing with pride, took a male new child and heard his name called Caleb. This new Caleb was a replacement child. The couple had lost their first Caleb, a cheerful little 4. Loss of a child was very, very rare. The community was extraordinarily safe, each citizen watchful and protective of all children. But somehow the first little Caleb had wandered away unnoticed and had fallen into the river. The entire community had performed the ceremony of loss together, murmuring the name Caleb throughout an entire day, less and less frequently, softer in volume, as the long and somber day went on, so that little forest seemed to fade away gradually from everyone's consciousness. Now, at the special naming, the community performed the brief murmur of replacement ceremony, repeated the name for the first time since the loss, softly and slowly at first, then faster and with greater volume, as the couple stood on the stage with the new child sleeping in the mother's arms. It was, it was as if the first Caleb were returning. Another new child was given the name Roberto, and Jonas remembered that Roberto the Old had been released only last week, but there was no murmur of replacement ceremony for the new little Roberto. Release was not the same as loss. He sat politely through the ceremonies of 2 and 3 and 4, increasingly bored as he was each year. Then a break for midday meal served outdoors, and back again to the seats for the 5s, 6s, 7s, and finally, last of the first days of ceremonies, the 8s. Jonas watched and cheered as Lily marched proudly to the stage, became an 8, and received the identifying jacket that she would wear this year, this one with smaller buttons and for the first time pockets, indicating that she was mature enough now to keep track of her own small belongings. She stood solemnly listening to the speeches of the firm instructions on the responsibilities of 8 and doing volunteer hours for the first time. But Jonas could see that Lily, though she seemed attentive, was looking longingly at the row of gleaming bicycles, which would be presented tomorrow morning to the 9s. Next year, Lily Billy, Jonas thought. It was an exhausting day, and even Gabriel, retrieved in his basket from the nurturing center, slept soundly that night. Finally, it was the morning of the ceremony of 12. Now Father sat beside Mother in the audience. Jonas could see them applauding dutifully at the 9s. One by one wheeled their new bicycle, each with its gleaming name tag attached to the back from the stage. He knew that his parents cringed a little as he did when Fritz, who lived in the dwelling next door to theirs, received his bike and almost immediately bumped into the podium with it. Fritz was a very awkward child who had been summoned for chastisement again and again. His transgressions were small ones, always: shoes on the wrong feet, schoolwork misplaced, failure to study adequately for a quiz. But each such error reflected negatively on his parents' guidance and infringed on the community's sense of order and success. Jonas and his family had not been looking forward to Fritz's bicycle, which they realized would probably too often be dropped on the front walk instead of wheeled into the nearby port. Finally, the 9s were all resettled in their seats, each having a wheeled bicycle outside where it would be waiting for its owner at the end of the day. Everyone always chuckled and made small jokes with the 9s rode home their bicycles for the first time. "Want me to show you how to ride?" older friends would call. "I know you've never been on a bicycle before." But invariably the grinning 9s, who in technical violation of the rule had been practicing secretly for weeks, would mount and ride off in perfect balance, training wheels never touching the ground. Then the 10s. Jonas had never found the ceremony of 10s particularly interesting, only time-consuming, as each child's hair was snipped neatly into this distinguishing cut. Females lost their braids at 10, and males, too, relinquished their long, childish hair, and took on a more manly short style with exposed ears. Laborers moved quickly to the stage with brooms and swept away the mounds of discarded hair. Jonas could see the parents of the new 10s stir and murmur, as he knew that this evening in many dwellings they would be snipping and straightening the hastily done haircuts, trimming them into a neater line. 11s. It seemed a short time ago that Jonas had undergone the ceremony of 11, but he remembered that it was not one of the more interesting ones. By 11, one was only waiting to be 12. It was simply a marking of time with no meaningful changes. There was new clothing, different undergarments for the females where bodies were beginning to change, and longer trousers for the male, with a specifically shaped pocket for a small calculator that they would use this year in school. But those were simply presented in wrapped packages without an unaccompanying speech. Break for midday meal, Jonas realized he was hungry. He and his group mates congregated by the tables in front of the auditorium and took their packaged food. Yesterday, there had been merriment at lunch, a lot of teasing and energy, but today the group stood anxiously separate from the other children. Jonas watched the new 9s gravitate towards their waiting bicycles, each one admiring his or her name tag. He saw that the 10s stroking their new shortened hair, the females shaking their heads to feel the unaccustomed lightness without the heavy braids they had worn for so long. "I heard about a guy who was absolutely certain he was going to be assigned engineer," Asher muttered as they ate, "and instead they gave him sanitation laborer. He went out the next day, jumped into the river, swam across, and joined the next community he came to. Nobody ever saw him again." Jonas laughed. "Somebody made that story up, Ash. My father said he heard the story when he was 12, but Asher wasn't reassured. He was eyeing the river where it was visible behind the auditorium. "I can't even swim very well," he said. "My swimming instructor said that I don't have the right boyishness or something." "Buoyancy," Jonas corrected him. Whatever. I don't have it. I sink. Anyway, Jonas pointed out, have you ever known of anyone, I really mean known for sure, Asher, not just heard stories about it, who joined another community? Well, no, Asher admitted reluctantly. But you can. It says so in the rules. If you don't fit in, you can apply for elsewhere and be released. My mother says that once, about 10 years ago, someone applied and was gone the next day. Then he chuckled. She told me that because I was driving her crazy and she threatened to apply for elsewhere. She was joking. I know, but it was true what she said, that someone did that once. She said it was really true. Here today and gone tomorrow, never seen again. Not even a ceremony of release. Jonas shrugged. It didn't worry him. How could someone not fit in? The community was so meticulously ordered, the choices so carefully made. Even the matching of spouses was given such weighty consideration that sometimes an adult who applied to receive a spouse waited months or even years before a match was approved and announced. All of the factors, disposition, energy level, intelligence, and interests, had to correspond and to interact perfectly. Jonas's mother, for example, had a higher intelligence than his father, but his father had a calmer disposition. They balanced each other. Their match, which like all matches had been monitored by the committee of elders for 3 years before they could apply for children, had always been a successful one. Like the matching of spouses and the naming and placement of new children and the assignments were scrupulously thought through by the committee of elders. He was certain that his assignment, whatever it was going to be, and Asher's too, would be the right one for them. He only wished that the midday break could conclude and that the audience would re-enter the auditorium and the suspense would end. As if, in answer to his unspoken wish, the signal came and the crowd began to move towards the door. And that's the end of chapter 6. Please have a look at the summary slide so you can see what important events happened in this chapter. Thank you. Okay, so that was the end of chapter 6. Now let's just do a quick summary to make sure you understand what that chapter was about. So basically, we've been waiting for this chapter because there's been this huge buildup about the ceremony. They talk about the ceremony, but we don't really know yet what the ceremony is. So it's finally time for the ceremony, and Lily's getting ready for the ceremony. Her mom's doing her hair because she wants it to be perfect, and Jonas reminds her how last year she got her new front button jacket when she turned 7, because before they're 7s, the children have to wear coats that fasten in the back so that they can learn interdependence by buttoning each other's jackets up. And now it's in the front, it's going to be more independent. So you're going from interdependence to independent. So Gabe is not at the ceremony this year because he's still developing. He isn't exactly healthy enough. He's not growing enough, and he's not sleeping enough to be put into a family unit yet. So normally, if that would happen, they would release the child, which again, we still don't really know what that means when they talk about releasing someone from the community. We know that they go to a different community, but we're not exactly sure what that actually means. So we're hopefully going to find that out in the next few chapters. But the previous night, Jonas's father appealed to the elders and won another year for Gabe on the condition that Jonas's family will take care of him until he gets to the point where he needs to be growing-wise and sleep-wise so that he can be with the family. So in the meantime, he is undecided, and he'll be assigned next year. Then at the ceremony, we see that one family is going to receive a new child, but they had lost a child, a 4-year-old named Caleb, a few years before. And this is very unusual in the community because everything is so protected and so controlled that this is a really unusual thing. But Caleb got away and he drowned in the river. So after Caleb drowned, there was a ceremony, a ritual of ceremony of loss, where they had to repeat the name of the dead boy softer and softer. So they started off loud and then they got softer and softer. And they did this all day, and it basically was sending away the name with the child who died. So that was the ceremony of loss. And then now today, the family's getting a new child, and again, the boy's named Caleb, which is a little bit strange, I think. But anyway, so now the community now has to bring back that name to this child. So then, in this sense, they start very softly, and then they go louder and louder and louder, and that's giving him his name back, Caleb, which is the one that was lost and now is back again. So a little bit of an interesting ritual there, but anyway. On the second day of the ceremonies, we see that the bicycles are presented to the nines. This is a little bit of a side funny story too, because really it's against the rules to ride a bike before you're 9. However, all the 9s end up actually knowing how to ride bikes, and they ride away confidently. So we know that that rule has kind of been broken somewhere along the way, and nobody really talks about that, but everybody kind of giggles about it. The 10s get their hair cut, and the 11s get new clothes and a calculator. during the lunchtime, they break for lunch just before the 12s, and Asher's talking, and he's a bit worried that maybe the elders would make a mistake in the assignments of their new assignments that they're going to get. And he tells some stories that he's heard in the past, and Jonas says, "Oh, those are just myths, and that's never really happened before. There's no proof that that happened." And Jonas also says that he really doubts the elders would make a mistake like that because everything is so precisely calculated. Like even when they are matching their spouses up, they spend years looking at the different personalities and the compatibility factors, and then before they even get a couple to be a couple. And then that couple needs to stay together 3 years to see how well they get along before they can even add children to them. So you can see that everything is very well calculated. So Jonas is like, really don't worry, Asher, because they don't make mistakes. That's just not this type of community. So that's a bit of a summary for chapter 6. Stay tuned for chapter 7. Thank you.